Hello, I am Peter Okocha. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. The Ethiopian Prime Minister flies into Sudan with hopes of easing tensions between the military council and the opposition protest movement.
We were running and saw people lying down on the street. You couldn't help anyone because as soon as you did, you'd be shot.
Epidemics of deadly diseases including Ebola and cholera could become normalized. That's the warning from the World Health Organization. Residents are warned to be extra vigilant as a group of lions escape from South Africa's Kruger National Park. Also on the program, worth their weight. We visit the boxing academy in Nairobi that is fighting to empower women and girls.
We envision a world where girls can take advantages of the opportunities they have and also to use these skills that we give them to empower themselves.
And the countdown is almost over as the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup gets underway in the French capital, Paris, in just over an hour. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been meeting Sudan's Transitional Military Council following the killing of dozens of pro-democracy demonstrators by Sudanese security forces. The African Union has suspended Sudan and warned of further action unless power is transferred from the military to a civilian-led transitional authority. Opposition sources are reportedly saying that one of their leaders was detained by security forces after that meeting with Mr. Ahmed. Catherine Biaruhanga reports from Khartoum.
Khartoum is a city gripped by fear. Most people choose to stay home. In the shadows, the security forces appear to outnumber civilians on the streets. These makeshift barricades have been put up in neighborhoods. They're made of bricks, plastic, and wooden poles. Young men are out manning these posts. They tell me it's to protect their communities from the government militia.
When they came here, they killed people. They entered our homes. They took some of our friends.
When they come here, it's a mess. There's shooting everywhere.
But opposition groups have also asked people to put up these barricades as a sign of civil disobedience against the country's military rulers. There isn't an official curfew in Khartoum, but through the night there are a few people out on the streets, and there's a build-up of soldiers and militia out on patrol, making sure there's nobody idle on the streets. Things got worse on Monday when security forces attacked the pro-democracy sit-in. Doctors aligned to the opposition say at least 100 people have been killed, but that in reality the death toll will be much higher. It's led to a breakdown in talks between the army and activists on forming a transitional government. These friends were at the sit-in when the government's militia attacked.
They started shooting live ammunition from everywhere, like we were surrounded from all sides. You can hear bullets from everywhere. There's literally nowhere to run to, safe place to run to.
We were running and saw people lying down on the street. You couldn't help anyone because as soon as you did, you'd be shot. We were running for a long distance. I looked up to my left in an unfinished building and saw snipers.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has arrived to try and mediate, but the opposition say they will only resume talks with the military if those behind the recent violence are held to account. Catherine Biaruhanga, BBC News, Khartoum.
Now, large outbreaks of deadly diseases like Ebola are a new normal, according to the World Health Organization. West African countries like Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone are dealing with the impact of the world's longest outbreak, which happened between 2014 and 2016. More than 28,000 cases were recorded and more than 11,000 people died. Previous outbreaks have affected small numbers of people. Between the year 2000 and 2010, there were just 12 outbreaks and with fewer than 100 Ebola cases reported. But fast forward to 2019 and the Democratic Republic of Congo is coping with another huge outbreak, the second largest in recorded history, with more than 2,000 cases since last August, the majority of them proving to be fatal. The WHO says the world is entering a new phase and countries need to be prepared for new deadly epidemics.
We are really scaling up our system to detect earlier outbreaks, but also making sure that we contain them much earlier as well, to make sure that if it starts somewhere, it stays where it is and it doesn't spread to the entire world. People are moving much more, and when people move, viruses move as well. And in addition, people move faster than before because we have now intense air traffic. And so it's easy to reach the other side of the planet in only a few minutes or hours. We have also a very intense urbanization. And when you have big cities are hub of transmission for many diseases, because you have internal movement within the city, but also from the city to other places. And so we are much more connected. And because humans are more connected, then transmission is easier for epidemic disease.
So that's what the World Health Organization has to say. But if Ebola outbreaks really are going to become a regular part of life, what will that mean for the African countries affected? Our senior Africa editor, Anne Soy, explains.
This warning from the World Health Organization is really in realization that such epidemics are becoming more frequent, and it is not just Ebola. There are cholera epidemics happening in different parts of Africa. There was a yellow fever epidemic not too long ago. There was a plague epidemic which was bigger than what has been seen in recent years, and therefore the experts are warning that countries should expect to see large epidemics of this kind that are complicated to deal with. And that's really because of the rising population. People are encroaching into forests, for instance, and getting into contact with animals that they were not in contact with before, and that is helping to spread diseases. 3 out of every 4 emerging diseases are called zoonotic. That means they come from animals. Infections are easily passed from animals to human beings, and Ebola is a classic example. What countries need to do is to be alert, to know, to expect epidemics of this nature. The DRC has dealt with previous outbreaks of Ebola, but most of them were small, averaging about 100 cases of deaths. But this one almost took them by surprise. And then it happened in a part of the country where there is insecurity. People there had never dealt with Ebola. Most of the outbreaks were in the western side of the country, and this is in the east. And so the dynamics were different. But what countries can do to prepare is to expect such epidemics and to have a plan in place to deal with them as soon as they emerge.
And we've got much more on that story on our website. That's at bbc.com/news. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa. Thousands of protesters have gathered in the Liberian capital, Monrovia, to protest against the government of President George Weah. They accuse the former football star who became president just 18 months ago of concentrating on acquiring personal wealth instead of tackling corruption and Liberia's economic crisis. Nigeria's broadcasting regulator has suspended a private radio and television station owned by a key opposition figure. The authorities say the broadcasters refused meetings for 2 years to address alleged bias, as well as not keeping up with financial commitments. The owner of the stations maintains they were targeted in a crackdown. A private company in Uganda has become the first to give new mothers and fathers up to half a year of paid time off. Uganda Breweries Limited is giving 6 months paternity and 1 month paternity leave. Female employees in the country are currently entitled to 2 months paid leave. Stop inciting your supporters to protest. That's the warning Malawi's President Peter Mutharika has given to opposition leaders following 3 days of protests in the capital. On Thursday, police used tear gas to disperse hundreds of opposition supporters who took to the streets calling for the nullification of last month's presidential elections. President Mutharika won a slim victory in the polls. The BBC's Emmanuel Igunza now reports.
Anger and disappointment have boiled over into the streets. These opposition supporters claim victory was stolen from opposition leader Lazarus Chakwera. Over the last 3 days, they have demonstrated in the streets, calling on the president to resign. But police quickly move in and disperse the growing crowd. Several people are injured as the gathering scampers for safety. Even the US ambassador who was attending a meeting at this building is caught up in the fracas. Her car on standby 2 whisker away.
I just heard gunshots and later saw tear gas canisters. This provoked the people.
The protesters say they will continue demonstrating in the streets until President Mutharika resigns and fresh elections are held.
You know, people are so bitter. People are so bitter. People were looking for change. People voted for change, but make with other people who don't wish this country well. Changed everything. This is the reason why the supporters of the Malawi Congress Party are all over in the streets.
Malawians went to the polls last month to elect a new president and parliament in what was the most unpredictable elections in years. And this man, Peter Mutharika, won a second and final term in office with the narrowest of victories, beating his closest challenger by just 3% of the votes. But the opposition led by Lazarus Chakwera and former Vice President Saulos Chilima have gone to court to challenge the results. Both claim there were massive irregularities in the votes. The president has urged the country to be calm and wait for the court ruling. But for some here, time is not on their side. Emmanuel Igunza, BBC News.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, Cameroon's indomitable Lionesses are back for their second World Cup. Can they return to their den with the top prize? That's in sports. This is Focus on Africa. The top stories this hour. The Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been meeting military rulers in Sudan with hopes to mediate tensions between the military council and the opposition protest movement. And the World Health Organization is warning epidemics of deadly diseases such as Ebola and cholera could become normalized. Now, if you're tuning in from around South Africa's Kruger National Park, you'd best be on the lookout. That's because a group of 14 lions has managed to breach the park's boundaries and has been spotted roaming near a mining town just to the west of the park. The BBC's Pumza Fishlani has been watching developments for us.
This pride of lions lived inside the Kruger National Park, one of South Africa and even Africa's largest game reserves. We're talking of an area that's just around 19,500 square kilometers. That's just over 7,500 square miles. So where are these 14 big cats at the moment? Well, they've been spotted on a mine in Phalaborwa in Limpopo province. Authorities there have said there's no need to panic. They say they've managed to confine them to one area. Game rangers are keeping an eye on their movements to make sure that they do not wander off to a residential area. They've told people to be vigilant, but to stay calm. So what's the next move then? Well, they need to return them to the reserve, and to do that, the animals first need to be darted and transported to a safe place. This news, of course, sadly comes just a day after a 2-year-old was killed by a leopard, also in the Kruger National Park, where he was visiting his father, who's employed there.
And we'll have another story about lionesses for you later on in the program. But first, last month, Togo's parliament approved constitutional changes that guarantee immunity for life to all former presidents, saying they cannot be prosecuted or tried for acts committed during their presidential term. In a rare interview, my colleague Sophie Kenye spoke to the country's president, Fonya Singbe, and asked what would stop him from abusing his powers, knowing he would never be prosecuted when he leaves office.
No, the situation was that the new provision was that it's like for the MPs, members of parliament. While you are in the parliament and you make decision, you vote, you express your opinion, at that time you are immune for that. But it's not out of your job. If you do something out of your job, like because I take the oath before entering in service. So if I violate that, I can be prosecuted.
So are you saying that there is a provision in the Constitution to prosecute a former president if they have committed atrocities in the country? Is it provided in the Constitution?
If they have violated the oath that they took. If
So
they,
you
do violate
so
it,
you will
yes.
not be immune from prosecution if you have violated or committed or abused your power in office?
Of course. If I, it's very clear because it's something that we read all the head of states, exactly.
The Togolese Human Rights League recently released a report titled Togo, Terror Against the People, SOS are killing children, and they cited prohibition of protests, enforced disappearances, killings of children. What is your reaction to this?
I think you are taking a report which is biased. And the country is not what is being portrayed in this document.
It is not the only report that is documenting issues of human rights violations and really issues of refusing people to go to protest for their rights.
You really think that people are not protesting in Togo? Every day there are demonstrations in Togo.
But they have.
But there are rules, in any country, because what I'm trying to do in my country is to make people respect the law of the country. That's what I'm doing. There may be some exaggeration, some excess. Like when you see, for example, in Paris, they adapted the law to the situation. Because what we want at the end of the day is that the protester be free to protest. Those who do not want to protest be free to work. That's what we want. So the guarantee, the laws or the rules or the rights of those who want to protest shouldn't be superior to those who do not want to protest. That's what we are trying to do, that's it.
So is the use of force the solution, really?
No, it's not the use of force the solution. No, it's to abide by the law, the solution. So we should do what the law says.
But there are some who describe you as part of one of the longest rulership or dynasty. How do you feel about that, Mr. President?
As you may imagine, this question has been raised many times, so I'm kind of used to that question. The only thing I say that I trust the Togolese people. That's it. And do my best to organize free and fair election. And if my party trusts me, I go. If the Constitution allows me to go, I go. Those are the two conditions.
We are speaking at a time when the Continental Free Trade Agreement has come into force. What will be the biggest benefit for Togo?
The biggest benefit is that every investor that will come to Togo, as you say, knows that he will serve a bigger market. That's a bigger benefit for us. And having the best ports, having the ambition to be the best logistics center for us, where we should be the gateway to West Africa.
Togo's President Faure Gnassingbé speaking to my colleague Sophie Ikenye. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's bring you some sports news now. And the 8th Women's World Cup kicks off in Paris, France in just over an hour with the host country taking on South Korea. Africa is represented by South Africa, Cameroon and Nigeria, who have qualified for the 8th time. The tournament is being described by FIFA as the most important in history, with nearly 1 million tickets sold for the 4-week competition. The BBC's Stanley Kwenda sent us this report from Reims, one of the host cities.
Welcome to the city of Reims here in France, where the Super Falcons of Nigeria are preparing to open their World Cup campaign against Norway tomorrow evening. But of course, much of the action tonight is in Paris, where the home team is opening up the competition with a game against South Korea at the Parc des Princes. Much is expected of the home team. Many of their fans here would want to see them emulating the men's team, which won the World Cup here on home soil in 1998. But of course, from an African point of view, there are 3 African teams, Banyana Banyana of South Africa, who are playing their first World Cup. and of course the Lionesses of Cameroon, who are appearing in their second World Cup, having made their debut in Canada in 2015. But of course, much of the continent's hopes lies with the Nigerians, who are very experienced at this stage. They are appearing for their 8th tournament. They have not missed any single tournament since the beginning of this competition. And of course, there are also 3 African referees on the World Cup duty roster as well.
Stanley Kwenda there. Well, Cameroon's indomitable Lions, as you heard there, will have their turn in action on Monday. This is the West African side's second World Cup. Coach Jemufa is determined to get the team to the quarterfinals. Celestina Olulode now reports.
Time to shine on the international stage. Cameroon's indomitable Lionesses are back for their second World Cup with renewed impetus. This year, the team will strive to reach the quarterfinals after finishing last of 16 4 years ago. Since then, the West African side have worked hard to build up their reputation, finishing 3rd at the 2018 Women's Africa Cup of Nations.
The preparation is going very, very well. We're working very hard so we can go as far as possible and bring the cup back here. So now we'll see how it goes.
But to make this World Cup count, they'll have to fight their way through a fairly balanced group, consisting of New Zealand, Canada and the Netherlands. Whilst the Lionesses can't afford to leave anything to chance, the team boasts a mix of experienced domestic and overseas players, and their hunger to win is evident for all to see.
Like any lioness who goes into the bush, we will hunt and bring back the prey because lionesses don't come back empty-handed. So we're going to bring joy to the heart of the Cameroonian public.
And whilst the Lionesses have the support of their nation, they'll need lots of skill to take them all the way. Celestina Olulode, BBC News.
Now, in one of Nairobi's toughest neighborhoods, a boxing academy is fighting to empower women and girls. But for many, Box Girls is more than just a training club. It's a refuge that uses self-defense training to help women and girls stand up for themselves.
I know how to defend myself if any attack comes to me. I know the areas where to target when an attack comes to me. I started boxing when I was 9 years old, when the program was introduced in our community at Kayole. The skills that we learned in boxing gave us the opportunity to voice out our issues. If we have anything or we feel oppressed, we can be able to case out. It gave me especially self-confidence and self-esteem, where if anyone tries to oppress me, I know what to do. If anyone tries to say that do this and it's wrong, I know to say no.
The space was created for girls to come and learn and discuss issues on sexual harassment, sexual assault and rape.
So in case of any attack or example, someone wants to touch your breast, you can block their hand, then either you throw a punch or you rock out. So if they try to do anything else, we show the girls the targets of where to hit, so they can block, then throw a punch. We call it counter-attack.
We envision a world where girls can take advantages of the opportunities they have, and also to use these skills that we give them to empower themselves.
It was important to me to give back to the girls in other communities because I also wanted for them to learn self-defense and for them to know how to defend themselves in any type of attack or in any situation that they face in their lives.
Good for them. And don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm at Okwoche. But for now, from Focus on Africa, have a great weekend.